Hitting revenue targets is hard and requires constant hustle. Last quarter's success is already forgotten. Learn the mindset and tactics of today's most successful revenue producers in B2B marketing and sales. We call this the revenue hustle. I'm your host, Tom Hessen, navigating you on this journey. Today's show is sponsored by 9 Lenses, an interactive assessment platform that enables you to add instant value to your buyers and allows your sales team to tailor business conversations focused on the pain points each and every time. Check them out at 9lenses.com.
All right, we're back for our next episode of the Revenue Hustle. I'm your host, Tom Hessen, and I have the distinct pleasure of having Cole Mayer on the podcast. Cole, welcome to the Revenue Hustle.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here and have a good conversation with you today.
Absolutely. So, Cole, you are the regional sales director at Navisite. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I've been regional sales director for Navisite here on the West. I've been in the enterprise IT space, specifically focused around professional services and managed services for about the last 9 or 10 years now. Sit in San Diego, California, and excited to kind of keep these things going.
Awesome. Well, I know we've had a couple conversations thus far, and I'm excited just the perspective you have, and specifically around services, right? Because I think a lot of times services are overlooked in terms of like pairing it with software and things of that nature, but we know how important they are. So let's just go ahead, give us your first revenue rule.
Sure. Okay. So my first number 1 revenue rule would be quality services. From a professional service perspective, that engagement breeds authentic relationships. So quality service engagements breeds authentic relationships.
Okay. So tell me more about that. So why, how does services like that breed their authentic relationship?
Sure. So kind of an interesting example. I started about a year and a half ago at Navisite, and at my first sales kickoff, kind of small background, but we've purchased a few different companies within our company, and there's a lot of software sellers, right? That background, they come from that context, and so I was kind of the minority, so to speak, in terms of having been more focused on professional services and managed services. So at the end of the night, we were having a conversation, right? And somebody kind of shared their fear of selling professional services, right? Not fully understanding where the value is, kind of not, just a different language for them that they didn't feel comfortable or confident enough to speak to. And so I kind of had fun with the paradigm shift there, because from my perspective, right, I'm used to being around a lot of customers who have been sold, the art of the possible based on whatever software we might be, discussing, whatever platform, et cetera.
Right.
And what you come to find really is that the actual implementation, the architecture, the building, the nuts and bolts of all the things that kind of fall underneath that very open-ended spectrum of the art of the possible really does lie in professional services. And so what I've really learned is that you can really earn, so to speak, your champion at a customer by getting into the nitty gritty with them, identifying like why they got onto this platform to begin with and what their goals are. And professional services is really a way to create a roadmap for that customer to go in there and actually quantifiably execute on these goals, right? The software is the capability, but the actual design, architecture, and implementation of this software customized is really what's going to get that outcome that they originally made that investment for. So I found through making sure that my intent and focus on making sure that I understand what the customer is looking to get out of it has really, really been able to breed extreme depth of trust with my customers, right? Again, being able to kind of quantifiably look back and say, hey, this is what we did. These are the outcomes we got. Just good old fashioned X plus Y equals Z, right?
Right. And I think you're talking about just the level of detail, right? Because in professional services, you have milestones, you have project plans, you have
scope of work,
right? What's in, what's out, right? So there's a level of detail, not just like licenses and modules, right? Like in software. But I want to go back to what you were saying about your colleagues. There are a couple of those colleagues you had conversations with. Like, what is it about professional services that they found to be scary or, just not comfortable selling?
Sure. I think, when you hear about the big IPOs of the world and the game-breaking disruptive technologies, et cetera, a lot of that's going to come from software platforms, et cetera. And really what's overlooked is, the actual professional services that got those results. And so in terms of fear, I think for them, it's really just kind of always seemed as if hey, we're getting somebody to add another $100,000 to $200,000 on this deal, right? That I've already worked on budget with. This wasn't involved, so to speak, etc. And so there's that fear of really kind of, it's a lack of uneducation, right? Fear have always been taught as an acronym. False evidence appearing real, right? And so it's just a lack of understanding of what that really is going to bring to the table. So yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to. Is a lot of software sellers have been, drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak, their whole careers on the fact that can do anything and everything, but kind of failing to take of what the internal resources per each individual customer looks like, which then kind of limits their capabilities of getting to what those outcomes could be.
Right. And I mean, I just think like as you co-sell, right? Because I think it sounds like just, obviously you have to get the customer wanting to have the platform capability. And then the next level of detail down is, okay, how do we implement it? What's exactly, like you said, defining the scope of work and what's the configuration and all those sorts of things. Like, when do you typically come into a sales opportunity with a, if it's a net new client or a net new install of technology? When do you appear on the scene?
So when's the best time to appear and when I appear on average are two totally different questions.
Okay, great.
I would say without a doubt, the best time is through a strong partner, whether it be through one of the major cloud platforms, ERP systems, et cetera, to be able to be with one of those software sellers and have like a unified stance as to where we're going, right? So before the customer even gets involved, having an understanding based off all the time that, whether it be Azure, AWS, GCP, the rep has had discussions with them, sharing that information so that we can kind of, one, save time, and then two, come into this technical deep dive discussion prior to all these platforms being purchased, licenses being sold, to really set expectations correctly. Now, the reality is probably more so, hey, we've got an EDP with this customer. They've got to spend X amount on our cloud platform by the end of this year. Here's the things they're struggling with. Can you fix it? Can you provide results, right? And that's typically where we do come in. And so there's a balance of the need to retrofit, right? A lot of cloud cost optimization kind of comes into play. We get an idea for their environment. And those variables never end in terms of legacy systems, so on and so forth. So really probably the answer to that question is when things start to not tick like they're supposed to, is when we kind of come in and try and, make a better situation, right? Lemonade out of lemons.
Yeah, and I guess that sets up for an interesting, relationship with the customer, right? Just because they're the ones that have made the investment in the systems and the technology, and it's not performing, and so you're asked to do some amount of hero work, right? In that scenario, so how do you translate that into winning the customer over?
So I think again, it's really got to focus on not playing the blame game, right? Not having any fingers going any way, but more so just a reevaluation of both of my and the customer's education, right? So like, where do we think we wanted to be? Understood. Where are we actually now? Let's bring us back to the reality of where we are present day and where we want to go. And then again, holding true to those expectation settings and just being authentic with the customer on what that roadmap's going to look like to get to that place. And so again, like you kind of mentioned, right, that hero setting of just coming in and say, hey, look, these things are possible. It's not going to be a walk in the park. I didn't necessarily tell you that it would be, right? So don't kill the messenger. But in terms of finding a path to a solution, kind of making sure that customers know that definitely exists. You're not the first person who's ever purchased something and not had the adequate resources to go and execute on it. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, no, and I guess like, do you think the customer did they think they had the resources to begin with? Because obviously any ERP sort of system or big technology system, it doesn't implement itself, right? You've got change management, you've got training, obviously, but then you've got the configuration, right? So I think nowadays, I've heard the number, it should, any deal should be 50% licenses, and it could be even up to 50% of services, right? Like, so there's like an expectation now in the buying community, be like, I need you guys to help me implement this stuff. So like, is that not what you see sometimes? Like, it's just not either from the customer, or maybe they just think, I don't need that much, or I've got it myself, and it's more of a budget.
I think that there's a bit of to be honest, I think there's probably a bit of ego involved, right? A lot of these platforms that we're talking about, people have, taken ownership of these platforms inside of their organizations for 15, 20 plus years. So they've had this sales cycle conversation. They understand that this guy and the next guy all have the new bells and whistles, etc. But I think that when we really start talking about a bigger consultative approach, that long-term vision roadmap is when it really starts to kind of break down a little bit at the ego to see how we can work as a team to really, really move forward in a bigger picture light. I think another challenge there too is that executives of a company have employees that have been managing these platforms for 50 to 20 years. So they see the new bells and whistles and they want one outcome. And then there's a whole different paradigm of reality for the people that are actually on the field on the day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah.
And so there's some silos to be broken down there in terms of making sure that like everyone understands that everyone's goals here, although sound different, are aligned and like moving forward to a more scalable, efficient environment.
Yeah, and since you guys are a professional services firm, right, as well as a reseller, right? If I have that right, so you're oftentimes coming in and providing services to a platform or a company that somebody else sold the software, right? So it doesn't have to be like we're not necessarily talking about Navisite sales people that have sold software. You guys aren't selling your own software, you're selling other people's ERPs, right? So on these, cloud platforms, but you're also servicing, right, other people's implementations.
Correct. And tying into kind of like the rule number one as a whole, right? I would say probably 7 out of 10 times we get a license sale after we've been brought in to fix something, right? So like we earn that trust, we earn that relationship, and we execute on our SOW, right? Which is a fine print detail of what we're going to leave your environment looking like. And I think that it's after that where the reps of X, Y, and Z companies kind of come back and say like, hey, the customer's really happy. I haven't had a healthy pulse on this account for X amount of months. I think it would be wise for you guys to kind of take over their license because they have so much trust with you guys. And then what that really enables those reps as well to go focus on different things, because it's not just me as a salesperson who runs the West, it's my team of engineers who have been in the space and focusing on these niches for, like I said, 15 to 20 plus years with dozens to hundreds of different use case examples where they can kind of make those problems that seem so big to a customer in their own environment seem a little smaller, and realizing that a lot of people have gone through this.
Yeah, and I think it'd be interesting to the to other executives, like what level of detail are you operating at in your sales process to get this SOW written? Because I think I've written contracts and software sales for our own at 9 Lenses. It's license counts, it's modules. There is some implementation details, but I suspect, given the services deals I've seen, it's just a completely different level of detail, meaning much more detail. So I'm kind of curious, like what level of detail are you interacting with your customers about to get that sale for services?
So obviously it all depends, right? Because we wouldn't be in IT if I couldn't say that sentence at least 100 times in this conversation. But like if I were to use an example of ERP systems, right? Everyone's going to have an ERP. It's going to be very, very, very unique to each and individual customer. So I live in San Diego. We've got a lot of life sciences and biotech companies here. And so when I have a conversation with them, versus a shipping company, right? Managing trucks, understanding where those trucks leave, when they drop off, who receives those packages, timelines, etc. It's a lot different when we're talking to, a company that's trying to solve cancer by breaking down blood cells at a genomic level, right? So we're talking about measuring milliliters per capsule, how much of those milliliters are left in the leftover volume, where is that being stored? So, through that process, we really, really get to know your business. And like I said, earn that champion relationship, because we're taking the time and effort to not only share what we've learned in the space, but also to learn what your day-to-day looks like. So that feeling of, I just hired a new employee essentially, and that employee, duels as a mentor to me on my day-to-day challenges. And I think that's really where you begin to start seeing that kind of vulnerability open up from the customer, right? We're taking that 2.5 hours to meet every one of their engineers on a personal level and figure out what their micro problem is that's all kind of contributing to the overall goal.
Right. And then I suspect that, like you said, there's sales reward for you for building that authentic relationship through that level of detail and through that services. So like, how do you see that come back, I guess?
Sure. Yeah. The full circle aspects of it, again, back to the late night sales kickoff call with my software people. Sales kickoff meeting that we had, explaining to them that like once you show and prove yourself to be able to bring results to the table, and then not only that, but take that next step to help your customer, your champion, build out their presentation to their executives, right? Here's what we wanted to do, here's what we did, here's where we are now. It's not, hey, can I get a meeting to talk about your roadmap? It's now much more so the customer has become dependent on your results, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of leveraging my results and my team's results to brag about their own agenda to their team and what they've accomplished. And so it's much more so that I begin to have customers texting me for quick questions because they know that they can ask me and I can go be a resource for them to provide that value to them immediately. So it really just breaks down the whole wall of like the professional, don't say too much, don't ask too much up front, like just providing genuine value up front really makes customers dependent on you in a great way, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can continue to, meet that standard and properly set expectations as such, like you're going to look for a much longer term relationship.
Right.
And I've seen that now, from the Qualcomms of the world and those directors moving to the Intels of the world and being in entirely different buying centers and kind of reaching out to me blindly saying like, hey, here's my problem, help me out. If you need time,
Right.
let's set up a call. Right.
Right. No, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think, the devil's in the details, right? And it does take a lot of work. I was just having this conversation with my team last week, and one example is just the level of detail that we need to manage, right? And with our customers, like you just can't. You've got to get to the lowest level of detail, right? Because I think that's where the real work is, and we can't shy away from getting that level of detail, because if we understand our customers' business as best, as well as they do, or potentially better in some places, because obviously the buyers aren't always the ones, cranking out the work 3-4, rungs down the ladder. And the fact that we as, the people that own the relationship can navigate up and down that ladder freely allows us to, see things and share things that maybe otherwise don't freely move up and down the ladder.
Without a doubt. And like one of the things that kind of triggered when you said that in terms of the devil's in the detail is like, in a perfect world, every buyer would want to know every devilish detail. But unfortunately, the reality is they want to focus on what's going good, highlight that stuff and get to the trouble, some details when they have time. And so when you can come in and really do that work, right? There's no other way to put it, but just like doing the work up front, learning that business, understanding where the real struggles are, like you said, turning around and saying like, hey, there's these like 15 cloud instances that your DevOps team like doesn't tag. No one knows where these huge pop-ups of data and computer popping up from, if they're relevant, if they're necessary, if it's a new employee, etc. And so going in there and like you said, finding kind of weak points that the customer might not have even known he had, and like, hey, this wasn't in the SOW, but we just saved you X amount of dollars a month.
Right.
And this is our recommendation moving forward on how to, not have to find this problem happening again.
All right. Now that's awesome. No, I think that's a great example. And I think sometimes, like you said, services are oftentimes overlooked in terms of the overall success outcomes that our clients have, because obviously the technology is going to do what it's configured to do. And it takes science, takes some art to understand the customer's needs and then translate, the services and the people and the processes to kind of align all of that around that. So I think that's it's a great reminder, right? And then the outcome and the benefits of that. So, all right, Cole. So let's transition into your second revenue rule. Why don't you give it to us?
Cool. So second revenue rule, mindset and attitude are the building blocks of success in sales.
Tell me more.
So I think, sales is tough, right? So when it's everyone knows that it's not the easiest thing in the world. It's only a small few. And so I think that a big piece of being a good salesperson is being able to maintain, the attitude of always being passionate about learning, right? Like always being able to look at your failures as an opportunity to learn. because those failures are going to be something that you can either be completely discouraged by and let that kind of energy feed into your relationship with your customers, a lack of confidence, a lack of dependency, all of the above, or really just taking ownership, right? When I don't understand something, if I don't know the answer to something, like always being authentic about that, sharing that that's something I'm gonna have to circle back with. You know, my little brother, he's a BDR in another company, and he's on his like second year getting involved, and he's going through this thing where he's like, my activity's there, and this other girl doesn't have activity, but she's landed these 3 big deals. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, right? And it's that moment of recognizing that feeling and saying, I'm in the right place, because this is like, if I wasn't feeling frustrated, right, then I wouldn't be doing enough to have the right to even feel like I deserve more. And it's just accepting that it's a numbers game, right? So I think following into that, really identifying what your intention is when working with the customer, whether you're in the building a relationship phase, whether it's a, hey, you've got a shot to make an impression on this one use case, and focusing in on that and nothing else, knowing that if you can, you know, give the customer what they want instead of worrying about your own agenda long term, that longer term vision will come through, because everybody wants to pitch their long term vision to a customer. Not everybody wants to go to the library for 10 hours and learn the definitions of all of the customer's environments so you can be a real tool in their toolbox, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, sales is hard. I mean, it looks easy for those that are on the outside. And failure is a big part. I mean, if you think about, like, I'm a big sports guy. I mean, if you think about, you know, baseball, you know, hitting, you know, getting a hit 1 or, you know, 3 out of 10 times is, you know, best in class, right? So you fail 7 times out of 10. So 70% failure rate is, you know, not acceptable in most professions, right? But you know, like in baseball, I think here it's you have to get at bats, and you are going to fail, right? And I think that's we want things to come easily to us, but I think you're right. Like the mindset and the attitude, if it's not there, you can really get inside your own head.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from, you know, one of the things that's like helped me really define and concrete my mental attitude, so to speak, is being a, you know, amateur salesperson in the beginning, having the cold calling, door knocking experiences, because you come to learn, right? Like, even if your product, even if your service or your solution, it can work, it should work, all customers should understand this, right? Like, we've proven it. So and so at whatever magazine has given us a nomination for great solution practice, whatever, right?
Yeah, right.
There's going to be so many variables internally at that customer that might change the impact of what you could or you could not do. And that's where you have to really disassociate and build confidence in what you have to offer. And it's, again, knowing that what your intentions are with the customer, right? Like, if it's not a time for them, don't push it, right? Like, they might not be ready to make a massive migration to utilize all the things that they've been telling you for months they need to utilize. So it's really kind of pulling back and learning how to communicate that. Like, hey, this is what I'm hearing you want to do. This is the roadmap I've put in front of us. Seems like we have some gaps here. Maybe we should kind of realign, refocus, and understand what our next steps should be that work for both of us. Instead of, you know, hey, I'm doing everything right, but I'm just not getting results. You know, they just don't understand the value I'm trying to explain, etc. When you get into that whiny energy, right, that leaks through unconsciously to all the people that you're going to be talking to.
Yeah, and I think it also puts more pressure on ourselves to win the deals that we think need to be won. And so when that doesn't happen, right, for any number of reasons, like you said, it's like, you know, we only maybe working 2 good opportunities, right? And all of a sudden one goes away, and now we're really, you know, in a harder space on ourselves and so on. So like we tend to sink our teeth into those 1 or 2 deals that we put all our eggs in those baskets because that's the only baskets we have, right? But I think you know, I've seen a lot of this just on LinkedIn, you know, threads and whatnot, just like disassociating yourself with the outcome, which is really hard to do early on because you don't have a whole lot to, you know, success to fall back on and be like, okay, well, that they're just not ready, and there's nothing I can do to make them ready, so I'm not going to try to push them to be ready, right? But early on, we do all those other. We try to control things, right? Because we're frantic about getting one of these 2 deals to close, right? As an example.
Without a doubt. I got one of my first ever sales roles. older guy, been in the space for a long time. He's like in his 40s. I was probably 19 years old, right? Or not 19, excuse me, 22, 21, 22. I got my first deal. I was ecstatic, walking around with a big chest around the office, bragging at the water cooler vibe. And one of the things that he said to me that has stuck with me ever since is you got to manage the highs just as much as you manage the lows, right? Like this emotional commitment and attachment to the feeling you're feeling right now, if that overbears your ability to handle the lows, then you'll never get to another high. And so it's just understanding, right? Nothing in this is consistent or present. And so you got to be grateful for what it is and kind of focus on getting back to work, pretending like almost it didn't occur.
Right. Right. And I think that's where if you think about, we're not really selling, right? Like we're not pushing a product or service. I mean, we are in the end, but if we can't help them with our product or service, it does not matter. We can't spend another, minute with them if we can't ultimately help them. Right. And so when you start to really hunt for can we help this customer with their, with their problems, and we're honest with ourselves, yes, they're a good customer, or no, because again, early on, we may be chasing anything that smells like a deal, even though they may not be our ideal customer profile, or all those different things, just because that's the only thing we're working on. But if we can manage that better, it's better for us all, right? I mean, for the customer and for us, but it's hard in those early years because you don't have a whole lot to fall back to in terms of success or
without a doubt. I was going to say it from like a immature, new salesperson's perspective as well. It's like a fish on a hook, right? Like they feel the lug time or the line tug, gets that adrenaline in your body. You're reeling it in, and you're reeling it in too fast because you're so excited, and you just feel it release, and all your tension dissipates. And I feel like from a mature sales perspective, understanding that your time is valuable. So when you feel that tightness on the line, instead of pulling it till it snaps, identifying with the customer that it might not be the best time to try and force this thing through will also win you an abundance of respect and trust with that customer, to the point where it's like, hey, this guy did right by me. He didn't force me into a conversation that I maybe would have gone down that path had he done so. And so, now I want to refer him to a friend over at so-and-so's corporation because I know they're going through a problem and they could use an honest consultative approach, right?
Right. Yeah. And if our customers or buyers think that we're willing and able to walk away because it's not a good fit, you're right. It instantly buys credibility, because they're not going to be sold a bill of goods or pushed into something, right? And I think that does come with maturity and knowing that, okay, I can't ultimately control the outcome of all these deals, right? I mean, I think over time I've gotten much more accepting to the fact on timeline, right? Like deals are, yes, can we do things to make our sales cycle shorter? Yes, we can be more efficient. We can come more prepared. But the customer's internal buying process is not going to change based on my desire to get this closed this quarter. Right. Now, maybe they can throw us a bone at the very end because they can move it up a week, but that doesn't mean that that's going to skip steps in their decision-making chain. And it just doesn't work that way. So, and so how have you seen your performance change just as you've matured and kind of gotten the mindset kind of in a better place?
Sure. I would say it's really one kind of given me a respect for myself, right? It's really built up what I know that I can do and provide to people who give the time necessary to, work together and collaborate. From a mindset thing too, I would say that it's forced me to double down on my education. Because like I said earlier, right, fear is false evidence appearing real. So I don't feel confident enough to present this. I don't feel confident enough to speak to that. When you really do adopt this whole abundance mindset, right, you're looking out for the better of the customer, right? And so being able to kind of say early on that this isn't a fit or whatever you said, and this is why, is again, just kind of providing that value, establishing that you're going to be looking, I've had a lot of tough conversations this year, right? CFO signed something for a complete redo. Little does the CFO know there's only one person in their company that knows this entire system, and they've been managing it for 15 years, and they don't want to tell us how it all works, right? And so there's those balances, and just being able to like learn and understand, how people tick is also going to be a big one, right? And that all is going to come to your mindset too. If you're working from a place of lack and demand versus abundance, like you're going to be scared of those situations, panic, and not be able to like really get through them and build rapport with the people necessary.
No, that's great. And I think that's, because I mean, we see more about mental health, and just the normal societal conversation, in all walks of life, sports and, with the pandemic and everything else. And I think sales is one of those unique jobs where you do have real high highs and low lows. And, I think what you're really kind of communicating is just this balance that you're able to bring, this attitude and mindset that just can bring balance, right? Just like you said, you have to manage the highs and the lows, but you do that through the right mindset.
Yep, without a doubt. Again, it's like, Tony Robbins has some example about how like as you're a kid, you walk into to the dinner table from the kitchen, your mom's been yelling at you to hurry up and get out of your room. You walk in, you say, does anybody need anything before I sit down? Everybody says no. You sit down, you go to eat, your mom goes, hey, can you get the salt and pepper for me? You're like, I just asked this question, blah, blah, blah. So you get up, you walk into the kitchen kind of begrudgingly, you open the cupboard and you can't find it. Hey, salt and pepper's not here, mom. You're going back and forth. It's there, it's where it always is. And while you're arguing with her, she comes around, reaches around the corner, and right in front of your face, moves something in front of you and grabs that pepper, right? And what that is your brain doesn't ever want to be a liar, right? So like if you tell yourself is true, I'm not good enough, this customer will never talk to me, I don't have the value that I think I do, you're going to unconsciously make sure to find a way for that to be true. Versus focusing on, hey, I'm in a problem right now, I've got some roadblocks, but if I can focus on how to go and find those, you're going to be so much more open to identifying the different roadmaps to, creating a better environment for yourself and for your customer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, no, thank you for sharing that. I think that's always a good perspective to have in this line. And again, at every level of growth, whether you're marketing or in sales, we're measured by our results, right? I think more so than in any other, well, I guess in most business, B2B jobs, we're measured in ways that most aren't. And so that just plays with our minds. So thank you for sharing that. So tell us, Cole, how did you get into sales?
I guess you could say I was born into sales. My mom I come from like a real estate family, so got my real estate license at a very young age, or when I turned 18. So did that, and then I jumped into a network marketing opportunity in college, multi-level marketing, that kind of business diagram. Found some success, introduced like 19 kids to an opportunity. Of the 8 people that stuck on, we built the business to about like 15 to 20,000 people globally. And so that was kind of my first, okay, hoorah, I can get behind this, listen to, like, become a storyteller, educate people, etc. And then kind of post-college, I realized that, there's a lot of dependency on the next person you talk to for your ability to grow. And so I really kind of wanted to just take the wheel into my own hands, so to speak, and build my skills so I could see a direct representation of that in my output. And so I started right out of college, went to, at the time was level 3, fiber optics, telecom space, moved out to Boulder, did kind of like a 3 to 4 month intensive training program, and then got thrown back into the market. Was there for about 2.5 years. And then up until this last year, for the majority of my career, I've been in the professional services and managed services space for Splunk specifically. So building use cases, and every single vertical, obviously a massive emphasis on security, a lot of ITSI automation. So yeah, it's been able to give me a very well-rounded understanding of not only all the verticals, but all the different kind of solutions out there that no matter what vertical you're in, you're going to be touching one way or another. So It's been a really good ride for me so far.
Awesome. So where can we follow you online?
LinkedIn is kind of probably going to be one of my main spots. Cole Mayer, ColeMayer. I'm hoping to get more active on there. More than welcome to follow my personal life as well. Cole Mayer for Prez is my Instagram, and same thing for Instagram's new version of Twitter, Threads.
Wow, early adopter there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on to the Revenue Hustle. It's a great conversation, and looking forward to keeping in touch with you. Maybe we'll have you back again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you for the time, and it was great to be joining me on here. Hope that brought some value to some of your followers.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
All right, cheers.
Thank you for tuning in to The Revenue Hustle. This episode has been brought to you by 9 Lenses. Close more deals with interactive assessments. Check them out at 9lenses.com. See you next time.